I'm your host, Benny Slade, and you've discovered another episode of the MO Sessions. Today's topic is, we'll be discussing a few of my favorite magicians. Let's get the episode started. Our quote for this episode is, "The important thing is perpetuation of the work and renewing interest in the challenge." This amazing quote that has inspired me is by John Rockerbomber. It is an excerpt from a longer text, which maybe I'll have the opportunity to read on here. In a book called The Card Magic of Ed Marlowe, a fantastic book and one of my favorites. And I hope you guys get something out of it, and let's go ahead and continue the show. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the MO Sessions. I'm your host, Benny Slade. I want to welcome you to this episode. If you haven't listened to any of our other episodes, please do so. If not, welcome to this episode. We have a great topic for you guys today. Listen, guys, I want to give you guys a huge thank you. So a couple shout outs. The amount of people that have reached out to me and shown their support, even since the last episode. I'm seeing the stats on my end of things, and I'm humbled and I'm grateful. I never thought that me speaking into a microphone and people wanting to listen would be so interesting for other people. And I'm glad that I can be a part of this community, this card magic community and magic community in general. So thank you guys so much. A few of my friends who are friends here at the podcast, I'd like to give you guys a special shout out. Chris Hannawell, who I've talked about in this episode of the MO Sessions before. We'll dive into that a little bit deeper in another episode. He's a great guy, great magician. He's based out of Atlanta here, and thank you to him. There's another gentleman, Michael Butler. He performs as Bean and Bear with his partner, Bean. Takoa Jones and Katie Osborne, who does our voice intro here at the MO Sessions. Without you guys, without a small circle of friends that I've met through the local magic club here, Ring 9 here in Atlanta, Georgia, which is part of the IBM. I'm grateful for you guys. I'm honored to call you guys friends per se, and just the amount of behind the scenes feedback that they've given me from a standpoint that I don't think I would have had means the world to me. So thank you guys so much, and thank you for being friends of the podcast. A couple updates I have for you guys is that we're working on a Patreon. I've decided that I can give you guys more content on Patreon and kind of give you guys a little bit more, behind the scenes work of the back room and start discussing some things that I really wanted to get into with you guys. One of the things we will be launching that you've heard me say here before on the podcast is Book of the Month. Book of the Month is now going to be an exclusive Patreon, I guess you would call it, content. And this Book of the Month for this month of September is going to be Close Up Card Magic by Harry Lorraine. You must be wondering, what is Book of the Month? Book of the Month is a Patreon exclusive video discussion on a voted or chosen card magic book. I will say that maybe I'll even do, let's just say, for example, Tarbell, there's card stuff in there. If I find something in there that I find interesting, I might make that Book of the Month as well. But for the most part, it's going to be primarily card magic. We discuss a few points or routines from the book. So that's why I'm saying it should be a Patreon kind of thing, because I can record the video and upload it onto there. So that should be fun. As well as a few other announcements I have for you guys, aside from working on the Patreon. In conjunction with the Patreon, we are working on possibly doing some merchandise. Simple stuff to start out with. As we grow, we'll have more stuff. But right now, those are the two big things I have working on, and I apologize that this episode is late. But we're here, we're recording it, and we're doing it. So I will announce at the end of this episode, we have our first interview guest who will be part of the MO Sessions. And I'll announce him at the end of the podcast. I'm very excited about this. He's a good friend of mine, a mentor to me as well, although we are similar in age. We are working on more distribution for the podcast to kind of get it out there. We've played with the idea of kind of keeping it a little bit more hush-hush. If that's the route I go, tell your friends. Tell your other card magic buddies or magicians who are interested in card magic. Let them know. Spread it by word of mouth or send them a link or text it to them. Whatever your form of communication is, get it going. We do have a contest or a raffle coming up in the next couple weeks here. I'm just working at the fine details because I've never ran a contest or a raffle on a media platform. So stay tuned for that. We do have some interesting prizes coming up. And because today is talking about my favorite magicians, I might turn this into a series. Who knows? Usually on the podcast, when I'm recording, I usually have my pick of poison to be sipping on and playing cards in my hand. Quickly, I'll discuss that I have the new Gemini Safari cards, Casino cards, Safari Casino cards by Gemini Decks. They are amazing. They went very quickly. They sold out very quickly. I'm a huge casino vintage style playing card guy. Arco playing cards is usually what I have in my hand at all times, if not Blue Ribbons, Aristocrats, or any other inspired, casino deck or vintage style. But these Safari playing cards are amazing. I don't get paid to plug them, but I'm saying if you can get your hands on some Safari playing cards, go ahead and grab some. They're great. They're fantastic. And Gemini Decks support my podcast because I love these playing cards. So yeah. And today we're sipping on nothing but water. Stay healthy, guys. Stay well. Let's jump into the topics. I did forget to mention that one of the things I am currently reading is Fair Notes by Edward Marlowe or Ed Marlowe or Eddie Marlowe, whichever one. It's all the same guy. I love that book. It's a small pamphlet book. Fair work I've been working on for a while. I think it's one of my stronger suits. I know like Frank Garcia has some work on it as well. But I find Pharaoh work to be really interesting because I don't really do mem deck work, but Pharaoh I find it interesting that you can place cards. The whole science behind it is fascinating to me. So Marlowe's Pharaoh Notes, I also have Pharaoh Shuffle as well, but going through it and reading all of it, how to check for, cutting at exactly 26 cards and, just the technicalities of it is just right up my alley. I absolutely love it. So I just wanted to mention that. If anyone else is studying it or has any notes on it, please join our Facebook group. You can find the links below. Let's have a discussion about it. So good. Edward Marlowe, one of my favorites. Let's go into my other favorites. So in a previous episode, you guys have heard me talk about being in this rabbit hole and going down the rabbit hole out of a 10-year hiatus and trying to figure out what realm of card magic or magic I wanted to go into. I chose card magic, and one of the things that I discovered was that there was a whole bunch of card magicians aside from like what I already knew, and one of them that I came across was a gentleman by the name of Frank Garcia. I put him number one because in my head, Frank Garcia is number one. I find him to be a very well-rounded card magician and a magician overall, at the table. I might get a little backlash for that, but I think Frank Garcia is a fantastic magician. He was known as the man with the $1 million hands, and supposedly the story goes that this is very loose and probably highly incorrect, and if anyone feels the need to correct me, I have no problem with that. But the story that I hear of how he got that name is because obviously not only did he perform really well, but he was performing at a gig once, and I guess he needed insurance in order for him to perform at that gig. He needed insurance on his hands or something like that. And so, yeah, the insurance was $1 million on his hands. So if anything happened to his hands or something like that, it would be worth $1 million. something along those lines. Anyway, so that's my understanding of how he got the name Man with the $1 Million Hands. I discovered him through Tannins. So Tannins, if you're listening, thanks. I discovered him through Tannins because I shop at Tannins. I don't live in New York or New Jersey anymore, but I still support them via online. So do so. And so being from up north, I have a certain way about me that everyone just assumes I'm from up north. And Frank Garcia, once I saw him perform, someone had mentioned to me Wild Card, and which is a fantastic routine in my opinion. So I checked out Frank Garcia on YouTube. Thank goodness for YouTube. I came across a few clips, and there's also like some kind of unpublished lesson that was on there. And then all of a sudden I go down this huge rabbit hole of references on just Frank Garcia, where he can be read, where I can find his work. And then I started to seek out his books. I absolutely enjoy reading his books. His style is fantastic. I find it to be very entertaining. It's very similar to me. I do have a few friends who have said when I record and I'm at the close-up mat and the angle is just like very Frank Garcia style. I have, a ring on and jewelry and things like that. And so I can relate in the style of Frank Garcia. And just the, the attitude of this is going to blow your mind kind of thing that he has is very subtle. But he knows, like, the little smirk on his face knows that, like, whatever he's about to do is going to be amazing and entertaining. And I really enjoyed that. I found that to be inspiring. And the fact that he has background in gambling and cheat work with casinos and working with, guys on the street. Recently I saw a clip somewhere from a show where this very famous street hustler who would pull would pull swindles and things on the street of New York back in the day. He was showing how he practices and stuff and pulls out, he says, "Oh, I got Frank Garcia's mirror." And I was like, Frank Garcia's mirror? And here he pulls out this like 5-way mirror, I believe it is. I have a 3, so like that's big enough for me, but 5-way. So you can see all the way from your left to your right and all the angles in between. And I was like, just seeing that is even more inspiring. The fact that Frank Garcia took the time to either buy this mirror or have this mirror made. Regardless, he had it. And when he's practicing anything and everything, he can see almost 180 from what, the layperson sees when you perform. And I thought that was amazing. So after that, I was like, I've seen his clips. I've seen clips about him. Now it's time for me to read the work, right? So now I'm trying to like find Frank Garcia and where to find, his books and things like that. And thank goodness for a lot of these Facebook groups and, connections that I have. I found his books slowly but surely, and I know there's still a lot in my collection I still need to get, but and I start reading them. I got his first book, $1 Million Card Secrets, which was recommended by someone I know to start out with. And I started reading it, and wow. I mean, the amount of card magic in there isn't just like commercial. It still plays today. And he had his production company, $1 Million Productions, I think it was, or $1 Million Card, I don't know, Book Productions or something like that. And I found it really interesting to read some of the stuff, and then I learned about George Schindler, and it's just opened up a whole new world of card magicians in a time period that I was not around for, which I do wish I was around for, so that way I could session with them and discuss things and things like that. I do understand there are a few students left of Frank Garcia's out there that I'm recently been in contact with. And maybe I'll even make it an episode, speaking with them or what have you. But I enjoyed his work. I think it's, it's not technical per se, but it's advanced. And for me, I think that's really important to have a well-rounded toolbox of tricks. But, the elephant in the room with Frank Garcia, and I'm not ashamed to say it, is that, he was known supposedly to, if you had an effect and you wanted to show him, or you were at a lecture with him and you show him an effect, that the majority of the time he might put a variation on it and publish it without your permission, or publish that actual routine. Whether that's true or not, I mean, that's in the past. The point is that I think it's just a misunderstanding of credit, and if he intentionally did it, then slap on the wrist for him. But I think at the end of the day, he's spreading magic and crediting magic in his books, from what I've seen, subtly to the people. And I enjoy his books. I enjoy his card magic. And he is one of the only magicians that will take, in my head, like if I wanted to do a full close-up set, not just with cards, but with other objects, he is one of the only few magicians that I will say that he makes me want to be, your standard close-up magician, table close-up magician. And take it for what it is. I find him inspiring. I enjoy him. And we'll segue into the next person. If he was still alive, Frank Garcia, I would have him on the podcast, of course. If you guys have any other information about Frank Garcia, or want to share any stories or anything like that, or come on here or leave a voice clip or a phone call to share with the MO sessions, please do so. I'll have links in the show notes for you to do that. And we'll jump on to the next person. I'll jump around here and kind of go back and forth between my favorites. I do have them in an order on my notes, but the last two, I got a couple together naturally. So the next person I have on my favorites is, out of many, is Sir Benjamin Earl. I came across Ben Earl recently, discovering about his Less is More books from Vanishing Ink, and his Past Midnight DVDs, which I've recently watched. So I think of Ben Earl as like there's two different not people, but there's two different phases that he's been in. There's the Past Midnight phase, and now there's the Studio 52 phase. And on the in-between is a mystery, aside from putting out, the first Shift book. I came across Shift 2, and wow. That's all I'm going to say is like, wow. I ordered it from Studio 52, and then I went to Tannins and got Studio... I don't say went to, like I went there, but I ordered it from Tannins and I got the Shift 1. And when I started to read them, it was amazing what was in there. The first Shift is like, I absolutely love the idea of having a book, but it being like a mini book per se, not like over 1,000 pages or, 200 pages or, these thick books or whatever. And, it was just really simple, strong punching card magic. And there was, I love the articles and the essays about deception and practice, and the technique part is my favorite. I don't consider myself a move monkey, but I do like understanding different techniques and moves and sleights to kind of build where I need to go, which I have a whole nother episode on that coming out, so stay tuned for that. So Ben Earl, for me, Ben Earl is a mix between the old school approach of how to learn card magic and a new way of presenting it to people. So when I say that, I mean like he's highly well read from my understanding, and when he's developing his stuff, he doesn't have any sort of outside resources. And I kind of think that's the way to go. I mean, Ben Earl, you got to understand, for me, coming out of a hiatus, and then all of a sudden Ben Earl pops on the scene with Studio 52, I'm 100% invested in what they're doing. And the way that, Ben Earl had these lives on Instagram that he was doing and had guests on there and very deep discussions about card magic and a whole bunch of other, and just magic in general. And it really transformed the way I was thinking about my magic and card magic and how to approach it differently. I find it really intriguing at the fact that like there is a way to think about card magic, and magic in general, and how to come through these techniques and moves and sleights with simplicity and naturalness. And for me, that changed my entire development on how I wanted to learn card magic. And I say that in the sense that in the last episode, when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to study, I decided not to watch videos. I decided to stop buying tricks. I decided to stop paying attention to the card magic world as it is today. And I say that because if I'm not paying attention to where we started from or how we got there, I'm not going to understand. Like, there's a lot of things today in card magic I find completely irrelevant to the art. It has its place, but in terms of like in real life sitting at a table, I believe in close-up tabled magic. I just think it kind of died out very briefly, and I think there are magicians out there that do it, and I think it's time to have a resurgence, because at the end of the day, to have somebody come to you and you not go to them says a lot to me, at least. You know, for people to come and sit down at your table and watch you perform, because they may or may not care, but at least they're sitting there. Entertain them, blow their minds while you have a minute, 2 minutes with them. I digress. So seeing him perform, you know, in the hands card magic, but still at a table, was, for me, you know, fascinating, because here he is taking stuff that I've read about from various different books, and he's applying it in the modern day world. And, you know, he creates this environment with Studio 52 that is, he really promotes that you got to understand your card magic. You got to understand the moves and why and how to apply them to yourself. And it's funny because I have a whole nother episode coming out on exactly that. And, you know, he spoke about this last week. He went live to just kind of check in with everyone and talk about, you know, the deep magic seminars he has coming up again, and which I haven't attended yet. I would like to. Eventually I'll get around to it. I'm submerged in so many other things. So for me, it's like, you know, he creates this environment where it's a community. And I really think that term community, for me personally, has come full circle. Because if you don't have your team of people, you know, sitting with you at your table who are friends and acquaintances and associates or whatever, with the same interests as you, I think, you know, it's pointless. Anyway, so he's creating this environment of people who are interested in the same things as him and wanting to learn and knowledge and everything. And, his thinking and his deeper, you know, thinking and further information on card magic and the way he thinks about it, and just kind of like, this is the way I think about it, and I'm just going to put it out there. If you guys like it, cool. If not, then, you know, whatever. I could say a lot of things, but I digress. So Studio 52 has been a huge step in my development as a card magician, and I think it's something that, you know, it's really interesting to see Ben Earl take card magic to a different level that it hasn't been taken to in a very long time. Not that he's being innovative, and yes, he's being very modern about it, but I think at the same time he's keeping those classic foundations of card magic and helping the younger guys, or even the older guys. You know, I'm not older, you know, I'm mid-range, I guess, if you want to word it that way. I'm still very young in my eyes. But he's bringing it to a point of understanding card magic for you to get the most out of what you're learning and how to learn it. And he has his own new sleights and techniques and things like that, and different handlings. But it all makes sense in my eyes. Like, I sit there and I'm not like, oh, well, that's interesting. I'll never use it. You know, how many of you guys have like watched something or heard something or attended a lecture and you're like, that's very interesting, but that doesn't fit me. I'm like that with Harry Lorraine. Love Harry Lorraine stuff. I think it's very interesting, but Harry Lorraine is a very specific type of card magic. It's very what I call Harry Lorraine. You know, I see some card magic today and I go, oh, that's very Harry Lorraine. And that's okay. I have nothing against Harry Lorraine. I'm just saying Harry Lorraine has a very specific performing style that just doesn't fit me. Even when I try to customize it to fit me, it's still very Harry Lorraine. So Ben Earls is that neutral ground of almost like a mystical being per se, where he's presenting all of these ideas and techniques and theory, and I absolutely love it. And I'll jump into my next favorite. The next two I think are, if you know me, are kind of obvious, but I thank Ben Earl for his outreach and his willingness to share. Another one of my favorites is Ed Marlowe. The thing I come into encounter with this older generation of card magicians, or magicians, in this case, Cardician. Edward Marlowe interests me the most because not only does he have, a little bit of that Chicago style, heavily influenced by Chicago, but the amount of work. And, it's funny because a very common thing I run into is a lot of these guys on Instagram who kind of know, but they don't really know, or haven't dove deep enough to really have a say-so, in my opinion. This very famous Instagram account, how can I say this without saying names? He makes fun of magicians, I'll put it that way. Made a comment about Ed Marlowe, and I had just kind of been scrolling through my timeline, and he had mentioned something about Ed Marlowe and jokingly said, like Ed Marlowe says he claims to know everything before everybody else. And I thought to myself, that's quite an ignorant comment. I don't think that's necessarily true. From the resources and the people I've spoken to, that's not the case. So I say that with the point being that, Ed Marlowe has so much published work out there. I don't think, if you look at the amount of published work from Ed Marlowe from the early days all the way up until Marlowe's magazines, which I really enjoy, up until he stopped putting stuff out, from my understanding, there's still a lot of unpublished stuff. And there's still a lot of students out there that have stuff of Ed Marlowe's that, they just never thought to release, and they keep it in their private, stash or collection. So again, my point being that Ed Marlowe had so much work, and not necessarily variations, but different thinking styles on the same sleight, that there's a whole book on Pharaoh stuff. I mean, seriously, like, he really thought about Pharaoh stuff and was like, created new techniques on Pharaoh work. And for me, that says a lot, about, like, let's think about that. When I sit down at the table and I do what I call magic meditations, which usually happen on Mondays, say that 3 times fast. So when I sit down and I have my mirror set up, which I try not to really play around in the mirror that much because it's a whole nother thing I'll get into in another episode. But when I'm practicing and I'm performing, I think about what I'm doing and what the outcome is, and how I'm getting to the goal of what I want to be doing with my card magic. So, like, Ed Marlowe always thought about magic. That's the story that I heard, is that he always thought about magic. Like, let's think about that. 24/7, you wake up and you go about your day, and you're always thinking about magic. I find myself doing that more and more, is where I'm constantly thinking about the simple, the basics, like the double lift. Like, well, let's talk about, in my head, I'm like, well, let's talk about how a spectator turns over a card. Because not only when we say turn over the top card, or is this your card and we're doing a double lift, we are then presenting to the spectator, this is what a double lift is supposed to look like. This is what turning over a top card looks like. So, you're setting the standard. So, like, here's Ed Marlowe, who kind of, whatever his approach is to creating this stuff, or his goal, was to create, different variations and things like that. He puts so much thought and effort into his work. It shows. I mean, Marlowe's magazines is like, it's him talking to me. That's how I think about it. I don't know if anyone else has thought about that, but when I read Marlowe's magazines and the Riffle Shuffle, especially Riffle Shuffle systems, if you have ever read them or gotten your hands on them, or even the original pamphlets that Marlowe put out, I feel like Marlowe is telling me, this is where your fingers need to be. This is how you pull, when you cut the packet and pull the cards apart and put them together for a table riffle shuffle, this is how it's supposed to be angled. No, that's too much. Close it up a little bit. That kind of thing where, in my head, I imagine my grandfather teaching me something and he would either be like, oh, you're not doing it right, dummy. Come on, do it correctly. Very old school, like, oh, come on. What are you doing? That doesn't make sense. Come on. You know what you're doing. Come on. Kind of like almost like that tough love kind of thing, but not, I don't know how to word that. Tough love, but with a good intention, I guess. So I never really got, when I discovered Ed Marlowe, I had known of Ed Marlowe. I think I talked about this in the last episode or a couple episodes ago, but I talked about my second deal. So my second deal, the naturalness of my second deal is Marlowe's no-touch second deal. I didn't know that until recently. So when I'm learning Ed Marlowe and I'm seeing his hands, the naturalness and the rhythm and the flow that he has it's uncanny. I mean, it's really fascinating to me because the more I'm working with cards and the more I'm, playing with them is what I say. And the more I'm understanding Sleights and Techniques by Ed Marlowe, I find myself handling the cards the exact same way. But I like reading Ed Marlowe's work because it gives me the ability to have my own style, present my own style to it without it being, like I said, Harry Lorraine is very much like Harry Lorraine is Harry Lorraine work. You can spot it, a mile away. But with Marlowe, there's a lot of stuff out there that people have just naturally interpreted it, and I spot it, when I can based on my knowledge of Marlowe work, and I go, oh, that's a Marlowe thing. And for me, it's just fascinating the amount of Marlowe stuff that's out there, and people really don't know it's either Marlowe or variation or their variation on a Marlowe thing. And somebody else I'll mention, and I hope they don't get mad, is Steve Reynolds, who has been a huge help. And, talking to him about Marlowe, like my fascination with Ed Marlowe is ongoing. Not just with Marlowe, the man, but also the magic. Sounds like Sinatra. The man, the music. But Marlowe is fascinating to me. The secrecy that he had behind the round table, the Chicago round table, which from my understanding is still around, which is also fascinating to me. Would love to attend sometime if I ever get the honor. But just that sort of secrecy of like, I've heard these stories of, when they first met Marlowe, like almost tough love, like, oh, make you feel like you shouldn't be here. You got to own it. You got to have the chops to sit down with me, and that kind of thing is really, it says something to me that I find fascinating because I feel the same way when I've had a few younger, I guess you can call them Gen Z or whatever they're called, teenage guys come to me and they want to learn card magic. The problem is they don't want to take the time to learn it. And I do believe not every Gen Z is like that or younger magicians are like that. I do believe someone who I mentioned in the beginning of this episode, Takoa Jones, he's a young man out of Kentucky. And this could be his debut into the magic world. So congratulations, kid. But he looks to me as not quite like a mentor figure, but, he looks to me for inspiration with his magic and to kind of keep him out of the nonsense that goes on with YouTube and some of the stuff on Instagram, and he's now able to spot what's BS on Instagram, like, oh, that's so stupid, like, you know, the quality of that magic is horrible, like why couldn't he just do it the right way? And that's what I find with Ed Marlowe is, like, although there's so many other variations of card magic and techniques and tricks, Ed Marlowe's work is a foundation for me that's very solid. And there's also multiple amounts of variations and work on just one thing. So in the sense that Ed Marlowe is a distant mentor to me, with the help of a few of his friends and students and things like that, and discussing Ed Marlowe with them, I think I'm in the right realm with Ed Marlowe. The amount of published stuff is like, I mean, Jesus, the expert, revolutionary expert card technique. I get them mixed up. How could you get them mixed up? Revolutionary card technique is all thicker for sure than the Bible. I mean, to me, that's like, I'm not going to say that is the Bible, but I mean, come on. It's like, it's amazing. So that's Ed Marlowe. I enjoy him. He's the main focus of my card magic, and we'll jump into the next one if you could take a guess of who it is. Went off on a little tangent there. Sorry about that. So if you've guessed it correct, my next favorite is John Rockerbomber. Naturally, to back up Marlowe. John Rockerbomber, who is now based out of New Orleans, who I know there's an older generation listening to my podcast who have met him and are friends with him. I would love to sit down with John. I find, aside from his magic and my collection of books that I have of his and lecture notes and Hierophant issues, I am absolutely enthralled by the fact of his writing style. I'll say that without going off on another tangent, I'm a very big reader, if you haven't guessed that by now. So my big genre is like horror books. But aside from that, I'm a very big Shakespeare fan. Plays and stuff are cool, movies are great, but the literature of Shakespeare is absolutely fascinating to me. Midsummer Night's Dream is my favorite book. And when I read Shakespeare, there's a certain level of like, wow, the literature that comes out of here is fascinating. Same thing when I read F. Scott Fitzgerald is just the amount of fantastic, you know, the writing style is just, it's I don't know how to describe it. It's just like perfect for me. I really get, you know, inspired by the language and the grammar that's used in books. So when I read John Rockerbomber is my American literature aficionado for card magic. His writing style is just so intriguing to me. Even especially in like the Hierophant issues, reading some of the stuff and the way it's written is so well done and very well vocalized on paper that it's, yeah. I love it. It's the old school style. You know, there are a lot of writers out there, but like, for instance, my father attended Syracuse, and the way he writes is fascinating because it's that sort of like, obviously there's grammatical. Is that even a word, grammatical? Well, there's that on my podcast. Can do card magic, but I can't say words. There are certain words that were chosen during writing that just are great. It's so stupid. I'm talking about words. This is ridiculous. So anyways, John Rockerbomber's writing style is absolutely amazing to me. So he's very, you know, one of the things I discovered and in talking with a few people is that maybe still is, very vocal about the nonsense that goes in the magic world and how it's just absolutely ridiculous. And I applaud him for that, because I think there needs to be more of that. I find myself doing that, where I'm just like, why is that an issue? Like, why are these things like a thing in the magic world? You know what I'm saying? Like, I find myself going off on like very small thinking tangents about like, it's absolute nonsense. Like, we're all one community, we can all be together, there's no need for a divide. I just don't think magic is political, and if you're making it political, there's that. It's almost like this beatnik, you know what I'm saying? Like a beatnik sort of mentality, which I've always had, and my dad always comments on it. Well, he's from that generation, so for me, it's I'm very free spirited in the way I think about things. Very open-minded. So when I read John Rockerbomber, it seems to be very similar. I could just be interpreting it the wrong way, but I find the fact, on top of his writing style, that again, there's that Marlowe secrecy of like dropping little hints here and there in the reading, and then you got to go and reference it, and then you go down this rabbit hole of like, he's talking about what in Marlowe magazine number 5? Okay, and there's no page, so now I got to search the index. Okay, it's on page 76, and then you go to page 76, and it's like, this was originally printed out in like so-and-so book, and then you're like, oh shit, I don't have that book, so now I gotta go here, and like, and it takes you down this rabbit hole of like, and I absolutely love it, and I'm a sucker for it, and I fall for it every time. And the fact that, on top of him being a direct Marlowe student, I am just absolutely fascinated at the amount of contributions he's given to the Marlowe legacy. I guess I'll call it that. And aside from Steve Reynolds is that perfect medium of that, and is obviously very good friends with John. So for me to see that as well is like inspiring to me to kind of have my contributions to Marlowe's legacy by learning his work and keeping it alive. And I'll say very briefly, Steve, don't get mad at me for mentioning this, but one of the first things I said to Steve when I started talking to him was, I feel a duty to keep Marlowe's legacy alive. I mean, people think of Marlowe as, some magicians, especially the younger generation, think of Marlowe as a joke. The amount of videos that are on YouTube, which upset me, not in a sad way, upset me in like, this is ridiculous, of people who are watching this guy named Edward Marlowe and their reaction videos to his card magic, and they fucking get blown away, excuse my language, they get blown away out of water because here's this guy doing second deals like no one else. Yeah, that's the real work. That's Ed Marlowe. This is what that generation of card magic was like. And for me, that's where I find myself. I find myself deeply instilled in a generation of card magic that is still around through students and things like that, and still alive through, different things, different mentors and things like that out there in the world. But I find it very scary because I find it very slowly vanishing. There's another tangent. Anyways, so John Rockerbomber is one of those guys where he's still putting out work. And for me, it's inspiring to see that he's always updating and reworking some of the classics. I see on Facebook and different media things that he tells a story or performs something or just performs or whatever. And he shares, whether that's how he chooses to be or intentionally is or just naturally is. He shares, and he's not, I read Card Fixes, and I think it's really interesting that it's a book called Card Fixes. It's fixes on certain things, right? So it's like I'm reading it, and I thought maybe that was just a cool name, and then I realized, no, he's going in here, and he's like very boldly telling you, like, this doesn't work out, or like, this is a variation on it. This may work better, but this is how you quote unquote fix it. And, or work around it. And I was like, I absolutely love it. He's just like not a whistleblower, but it's just like, why do it this way when this way could be so much better? You know what I'm saying? Like, I find it inspiring. Maybe I'm thinking about John all wrong. But I absolutely love his writing. I find his handling of cards very inspirational to me. He continues to put out work. I hope to meet him. And we'll jump on to the next part of the episode. And I appreciate you guys staying in and tuning in so far. My favorites. I still have so many that I want to talk about. But because episode time gives me so much time, I'll cut it right here. And we'll discuss a couple other things and we'll keep going. So I appreciate you guys tuning into another episode of the MO Sessions. Sorry, I'm just gathering my thoughts. I will announce that our first guest here on the MO Sessions, I am very happy to introduce him and have him be on this episode as my first conversation. It will be my good buddy, Chris Hannawell. Chris Hannawell is a magician out of Atlanta, Georgia. I mentioned him in the beginning. He's been a huge inspiration to me and what he's doing for magic right now and shows me card magic, maybe just because I'm interested in it. But I followed him for a very long time and then finally had the guts to approach him and say, hey, let's be friends, pal. And now we're friends. So he'll be on here. That episode will be broadcasting September 7th, I believe it is. It may change. I'll let you know. You can follow us, listen to us on Apple, Spotify, and Overcast. You can find us on all social media platforms at MO Sessions 52. There's a link in the show notes for our secret Facebook group if you want to be a part of it. Those who are in the Facebook group, let's start having conversations because not much activity in there. I would love to have everyone be a part of the Facebook group and start conversations. Those who have been active, thank you so much. Again, you can find us MO Sessions 52 on all social media platforms. I appreciate you guys tuning into another episode of the MO Sessions. I'm excited to have another one here soon come out. I'm excited for our interview. Thank you again to the supporters and everybody. Our Patreon will be launching soon here. Thank you guys so much. I'll see you on the next one. Let's cue in the end credits.